What if you could save 1,000,000 lives by killing just one person? Sounds like a plot twist from a dystopian novel, right? Welcome to What If Horizons, the podcast where we dive into the wild, the weird, and the downright unthinkable. I'm your host, and today we're tackling a question that's equal parts horrifying and fascinating. What if killing one person could save 1,000,000? Let's start with the obvious. This is a moral minefield. Philosophers have been arguing about this kind of thing for centuries, and let's be honest, they're still not done. But let's not get bogged down in ancient debates. Instead, let's imagine this scenario in the real world. Picture this. You're sitting in a room with a big red button. Someone tells you that if you press it, one person dies, but 1,000,000 people are saved. Do you press it? I mean, it's a button. Who doesn't love pressing buttons? But wait. What if that one person is, say, your favorite barista? Suddenly, it's not so simple. Now, let's add some context. Who's the one person? Are they a villain plotting to unleash a deadly virus? Or are they just an unlucky soul chosen at random? And who's doing the choosing? Some shadowy government agency, a rogue AI, or maybe it's you, because apparently, you're the one with the button. Let's be real. This scenario is basically the plot of every superhero movie ever. The hero has to make the impossible choice to save the world. But in real life, there's no epic soundtrack or slow-motion montage. It's just you, the button, and 1,000,000 lives hanging in the balance. And let's not forget the practicalities. How do you even know pressing the button will save 1,000,000 people? What if it's a trick? What if pressing the button actually unleashes a swarm of angry bees? Or worse, what if it just orders 1,000,000 pizzas to your house? Now you've got a dead person and a mountain of pepperoni. But let's say it's legit. You press the button, one person dies, and 1,000,000 are saved. Congratulations, you're a hero. Except now you've got to live with the fact that you killed someone. Sure, you saved 1,000,000 lives, but try explaining that at your next family dinner. So, what would you do? Press the button or walk away? And more importantly, would you want to be the person with the button in the first place? Stay tuned, because we're just getting started. This is What If Horizons, and we're about to dive deeper into the chaos. Now let's take this morbid thought experiment out of the abstract and into reality. History shows us we've actually faced versions of this dilemma before, just wrapped in bureaucratic language and spreadsheets. During wartime, generals routinely make calculations about acceptable casualties. Public health officials weigh vaccine risks against potential lives saved. Even urban planners decide which neighborhoods get flood protection based on cost-benefit analyses that literally put a price tag on human life. The uncomfortable truth: we already live in a world where some lives are valued more than others. Insurance companies do it every day when denying coverage. Governments do it when setting speed limits, knowing full well lower limits would save lives but choosing convenience over safety. Heck, your local coffee shop does it when deciding whether to spend an extra 50 cents for the safer cleaning supplies. This brings us to the real question lurking behind our hypothetical: who gets to decide whose life matters less? Because let's be honest, if we actually implemented this kill one to save 1,000,000 policy, the selection process would immediately become political. The chosen one wouldn't be some random lottery winner, it would inevitably be whoever the people in power disliked most that week. Imagine the committee meetings. Well, we could eliminate that annoying whistleblower. I mean, statistically speaking, his demographic has above-average risk factors. Suddenly our philosophical dilemma turns into the world's darkest game show, with corporate sponsors and voting rounds. And here's the kicker: we'd probably convince ourselves this was ethical. Humans have an incredible talent for justifying terrible things when they're presented as being for the greater good. History books are full of atrocities committed by people who genuinely believed they were saving humanity. The road to hell is paved with cost-benefit analyses. So before we get too comfortable with our hypothetical button, maybe we should ask: in a world that already makes life and death calculations every day, do we really want to make the math that explicit? Let's play devil's advocate for a moment, because if we're talking about killing people to save others, the devil definitely deserves a seat at the table. What if this isn't just some abstract ethical puzzle? What if we could actually identify that one person whose elimination would objectively make the world better? Take disease carriers, for example. Typhoid Mary was a real person who refused to stop working as a cook while knowingly infected with typhoid fever. She caused multiple deadly outbreaks. In her case, permanently removing her from society did save lives. Today we have quarantine protocols instead of assassinations, but the principle remains: we already accept restricting some individuals' freedoms to protect public health. Now expand that concept. What about the billionaire hoarding a malaria vaccine patent? The corrupt dictator starving his people? The terrorist mastermind plotting attacks? Suddenly our hypothetical starts feeling less philosophical and more practical. There are absolutely people whose removal would save countless lives. The problem isn't identifying them, it's deciding who gets to make that call. Because here's where it gets messy. One person's clear public threat is another person's freedom fighter or misunderstood genius. For every Hitler we can all agree was worth stopping, there are 100 controversial figures where reasonable people disagree. And once you establish that some lives are expendable for the greater good, that line keeps moving. First it's terrorists, then criminals, then political opponents, then people who don't recycle properly. This slippery slope isn't just theoretical. Look at any authoritarian regime in history, and you'll find they all started with some version of, we need to eliminate these bad people to protect society. The road to genocide is paved with good intentions and bad cost-benefit analyses. So maybe the real question isn't whether killing one could save a million, but whether humanity can be trusted with that kind of calculus. Our track record suggests the answer is a hard no. But hey, that's why we keep these discussions theoretical. In reality, we'd probably just argue about it on social media while the world burns. Now let's consider the psychological toll of actually implementing such a policy. Imagine being the executioner in this grand life-saving scheme. Sure, the first time might feel heroic, I took one life to save a million. But by the 100th time, you're just the person who brings potato salad to the annual million lives saved barbecue while quietly wondering if you're the villain. The selection committee wouldn't fare much better. Picture a group of bureaucrats sitting around a conference table debating who gets the axe this quarter. Johnson in accounting has been late on his TPS reports 3 times this month, and statistically, his blood type matches our quarterly quota. Before long, workplace productivity would skyrocket, not because people are motivated, but because everyone's terrified of looking like the least valuable employee. And what about the families of the sacrificed? Would they get one of those oversized novelty checks? Sorry we had to vaporize your dad, but here's $1 million and a commemorative plaque. The holiday cards would be awkward. This year we're grateful for Dad's posthumous Employee of the Month award. The ripple effects get even weirder. Entire industries would spring up around gaming the system. Dating profiles would start listing low statistical value to society as a selling point. Reality shows would compete to find the most worthless human alive. The Nobel Peace Prize would go to whoever invented the most creative way to appear indispensable. Perhaps most disturbingly, we'd probably develop a cultural numbness to the whole affair. The evening news would sandwich the weekly sacrifice between sports scores and weather. And in today's drawing, Karen from marketing was selected. Back to you, Tom, for the weekend forecast. We'd develop euphemisms like population adjustment specialists and demographic rebalancers to avoid saying what we're really doing. This is the dirty secret of utilitarian calculus. It only works in theory. In practice, humans can't maintain that level of cold calculation without losing something fundamental. We'd either go mad from guilt or become monsters through indifference. Either way, the society that emerges might save millions of lives, but it would lose its soul in the process. Let's shift gears and imagine the legal implications of this kill one, save a million policy. First, we'd need a whole new branch of law. Let's call it utilitarian justice. Forget innocent until proven guilty. Here, it's expendable until proven essential. The courtroom drama would be intense. Picture a defense attorney arguing, "Your Honor, my client may have committed tax fraud, but have you considered his exceptional karaoke skills? Surely that makes him worth keeping around." Then there's the paperwork. Every execution would require a mountain of forms, environmental impact assessments to ensure no endangered species are harmed, cost-benefit analyses to confirm the math adds up, and, of course, the mandatory moral quandary waiver. The bureaucracy would be so overwhelming that the process might take years, effectively turning the whole system into a morbid waiting list. And what about appeals? Imagine the Supreme Court debating whether someone's contribution to society outweighs their tendency to double-dip chips at parties. The court finds that while the defendant's habit of singing loudly in public showers is indeed a public nuisance, his invention of the self-stirring coffee mug cannot be overlooked. Case dismissed. The legal system would also have to address the inevitable loopholes. What if someone fakes their own death to avoid selection? What if a corporation bribes officials to keep their CEO off the list? And what happens when someone discovers that killing 2 people could save 2 million? The slope gets slippery fast. Then there's the issue of consent. Would the chosen individual have to agree to their sacrifice? If so, what happens if they refuse? Do we force them? And if we do, doesn't that undermine the entire moral justification? Suddenly, we're not saving lives, we're just running a state-sponsored murder program with really good PR. The legal chaos alone might make the whole idea unworkable. But hey, at least it would keep lawyers employed. After all, in a world where one life can be traded for 1 million, someone's got to make sure the paperwork is in order. Now let's think about the societal impact of such a policy. Imagine living in a world where your value is constantly being measured, weighed, and judged. Every decision you make could determine whether you're deemed worth keeping. Forget worrying about your credit score, now you've got to worry about your societal utility score. The pressure to be useful would be crushing. People would scramble to prove their worth, turning life into one endless resume-building exercise. Sure, I volunteer at the orphanage, but is it enough to offset my habit of leaving shopping carts in parking lots? Maybe I should start a charity too, just to be safe. Social dynamics would shift dramatically. Popularity would no longer be about charisma or charm, it would be about utility. The cool kids would be the ones with the highest societal contribution scores, while the outcasts would be those deemed marginally beneficial. High school reunions would turn into competitive showcases of who's done the most to justify their continued existence. And what about relationships? Dating apps would include a societal value rating. Swipe right if you're a doctor, swipe left if you're a professional couch potato. Marriages would be scrutinized. Are you two really contributing enough as a unit, or should we consider reallocating one of you? The workplace would become a pressure cooker. Employers would use societal value as a metric for promotions and layoffs. Sorry, Karen, but while your PowerPoint skills are impressive, the algorithm says we'd save more lives by keeping Dave from accounting. Clean out your desk by noon. Even leisure activities would be affected. Why go to the movies when you could be volunteering? Why read a novel when you could be learning a life-saving skill? The concept of wasting time would take on a whole new meaning. This constant pressure to prove one's worth would create a society of overachievers, but at what cost? Would we lose the ability to simply exist, to enjoy life without constantly justifying our place in it? And what happens to those who can't keep up? The elderly, the disabled, the simply average? In a world where every life is measured by its utility, humanity itself might become the first casualty. After all, what's the point of saving 1 million lives if none of them are allowed to truly live? Let's take a moment to consider the economic implications of this kill one, save 1 million policy. At first glance, it might seem like a cost-effective solution, one life for 1 million saved. But the devil, as always, is in the details. First, there's the cost of implementation. Setting up the infrastructure to identify, evaluate, and execute the chosen individuals would require a massive budget. We're talking about a whole new government department. Let's call it the Department of Utilitarian Efficiency, DO. DO would need offices, staff, and, of course, a catchy slogan. Maybe something like, due diligence for a better tomorrow. Then there's the issue of compensation. Would the families of the sacrificed receive financial support? If so, how much? And what about the psychological trauma for the executioners? They'd probably need therapy, paid leave, and hazard pay. Suddenly, the cost of saving 1 million lives starts to look a lot higher. The policy would also have a significant impact on the labor market. If people are constantly being evaluated based on their societal value, it could lead to a brain drain in certain fields. Why become an artist or a musician when those careers are deemed less essential? We might end up with a society full of doctors and engineers but devoid of creativity and culture. And let's not forget the potential for corruption. With so much at stake, the system would be ripe for abuse. Wealthy individuals might bribe officials to keep themselves or their loved ones off the list. Corporations could lobby to have their competitors' key employees deemed expendable. The economic fallout could be catastrophic. Then there's the question of insurance. How would life insurance policies work in a world where your life could be terminated for the greater good? Would premiums skyrocket? Would insurers refuse to cover anyone with a low societal value score? The insurance industry would need a complete overhaul. Finally, consider the impact on innovation. If people are constantly worried about proving their worth, they might be less likely to take risks or pursue unconventional ideas. Why invest in a startup when it might fail and lower your societal value score? Why experiment with new technologies when the safe bet is to stick with what's already proven? In the end, the economic costs of such a policy might outweigh the benefits. Sure, we'd save 1 million lives, but at what price? The financial burden, the loss of creativity, and the potential for corruption could create a society that's efficient but ultimately unsustainable. So, while the idea of killing one to save 1 million might seem like a straightforward solution, the economic realities suggest it's anything but. In the grand calculus of life and death, the numbers don't always add up. Now let's explore the philosophical paradoxes this kill one, save 1 million policy would create. At its core, the idea challenges our fundamental notions of morality, justice, and the value of human life. First, there's the question of equality. If we accept that one life can be sacrificed for the greater good, we're essentially saying that not all lives are equal. Some are worth more, some are worth less. This flies in the face of the principle that all humans have inherent worth, regardless of their utility. Once we start ranking lives, where do we draw the line? Then there's the issue of consent. If the chosen individual doesn't agree to their sacrifice, are we violating their rights? And if we force them, doesn't that make us the villains? On the other hand, if they do consent, does that make it morally acceptable? Or are we just exploiting their sense of altruism? The policy also raises questions about responsibility. If we're willing to kill one person to save 1 million, are we absolving ourselves of the responsibility to find better solutions? Instead of addressing the root causes of the problems we face, we're taking the easy way out, sacrificing individuals to maintain the status quo. And what about the slippery slope? Once we accept that it's okay to kill one person for the greater good, what's to stop us from killing 2, or 10, or 100? The line between necessary sacrifice and outright genocide becomes dangerously blurred. There's also the paradox of intention. If we kill one person to save 1 million, are we acting out of compassion for the many, or are we simply justifying our own ruthlessness? Can an act of violence ever be truly altruistic, or is it always tainted by self-interest? Finally, there's the question of legacy. How would history remember a society that implemented such a policy? Would we be celebrated as pragmatic heroes who made the hard choices, or condemned as moral cowards who sacrificed our humanity for the sake of efficiency? These philosophical dilemmas highlight the complexity of the issue. While the idea of killing one to save 1 million might seem simple on the surface, it forces us to confront deep, uncomfortable truths about morality, justice, and the value of human life. In the end, the question isn't just about whether we can kill one person to save 1 million, it's about what kind of society we want to be. Are we willing to sacrifice our principles for the sake of practicality, or do we hold firm to the belief that every life has inherent worth? The answer, as always, lies in the choices we make. Let's get brutally honest about what this slippery slope would actually look like in practice. The first execution would make international headlines, carefully sanitized press conferences with government officials using clinical terms like necessary adjustment, while secretly horrified staffers vomit in White House bathrooms. By the 100th execution, it would be a segment on the evening news between sports and weather. Local stations would run human interest pieces about that day's sacrifice, focusing on their love of puppies and obscure hobbies rather than why we've normalized state-sponsored murder. Before long, corporations would sponsor the events. Can't you see the chilling commercials? Tonight's societal rebalancing segment brought to you by Pfizer, helping make difficult choices easier since 1849. The psychological toll would transform society in grotesque ways. People would develop a nervous, performative altruism, loudly volunteering at soup kitchens while subtly sabotaging coworkers' reputations to boost their own survival metrics. Every birthday gift would come with unspoken calculations about how it might influence one's societal value score. Romantic partners would weigh relationships based on combined utility rather than love. Dark humor would flourish as the only coping mechanism. Memes about execution quotas would trend online while gallows humor infiltrates workplaces. Don't mind Gary's empty desk. Turns out his Excel skills weren't quite as valuable as he claimed. Young people would develop ironic slang about being on the bubble, while secretly refreshing their mandatory contribution dashboards in panic. And inevitably, corruption would seep in. Influencers would sell life preservation courses. Lobbyists would ensure certain professions get protection. The wealthy would find creative ways to game the system while the poor disproportionately fill sacrifice quotas. Every aspect of society would become transactional, cynical, and profoundly dehumanizing, all while maintaining a thin veneer of utilitarian righteousness. This is the true cost our thought experiment reveals. Not just about the morality of killing one to save many, but about what systematic devaluation does to the human spirit. A society that treats lives as variables in an equation might survive, but it would cease to be anywhere worth living. The survivors wouldn't be heroes. They'd just be the last rats left scrambling in the maze, wondering when their number comes up. So where does this leave us after diving down this disturbing rabbit hole? The uncomfortable truth is that humanity thrives in the messy gray areas, not in clean mathematical equations. Our greatest achievements as a species, art, compassion, scientific breakthroughs, often spring from the very unpredictability this hypothetical would eliminate. Perhaps the most revealing insight is that we're asking the wrong question altogether. The real challenge isn't deciding whether to sacrifice one for many, but figuring out how to create systems where such impossible choices don't exist. Instead of looking for someone to blame or eliminate, we should focus on building better solutions, medical advances, conflict resolution, social safety nets. That said, this morbid thought experiment serves an important purpose. It holds up a funhouse mirror to our existing societal choices. Every time we prioritize profits over people, ignore preventable suffering, or treat certain lives as disposable, we're already making subconscious calculations about who matters. The value isn't in finding an answer to this impossible scenario, but in recognizing the deeper ethical muscles it helps us exercise. If this episode has your brain spinning in all directions, good, that means you're paying attention to what really matters. Drop us a comment with your take. Would you press the button? How do you think society would realistically handle this dilemma? And most importantly, what impossible topics should we tackle next? Don't forget to subscribe to What If Horizons for more mind-bending explorations of ethical gray areas, futuristic scenarios, and unsettling questions you never knew you needed answered. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next descent into uncomfortable but necessary conversations. Until then, stay curious, stay compassionate, and maybe think twice before pushing any mysterious red buttons.